We talked about Kevin De Bruyne leaving the Premier League, heading to Italy. And that's the end of an era for sure. The 2010s, De Bruyne, in my opinion, is the best player of the 2010s in the Premier League into the 2020s. You could make that face, but it is what it is. Well, at least 2010s is weird. Like the last decade, I should say. 20, because he wasn't there from the start of the 2020s. 2015 to 2025, he was the best player in the Premier League. But that's the end of one era for Manchester City. Another Premier League legend, in my opinion, I think is undeniable. Son Heung-Min, however you want to say it. He has left Tottenham Hotspur, played his final game for the club the other day out in Korea, actually, which is a special moment as well. A friendly against Newcastle, preseason friendly. He's heading to LAFC for, the reported fees are a little varying, but anywhere from 15 to 20 plus mil, they're saying, for him to head over there. And I just wanted to talk a little bit, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but really, I think for Son, if we're talking about Spurs legend, he's probably number one. Maybe there's some old Spurs legends from in history, whatever that people plays, but we don't care. So in terms of
they didn't win a trophy.
They didn't bring it home, man. In terms of modern Spurs legend, it could have been Harry Kane. That dude was so greedy for some type of silverware. He was letting those narratives get into his head. He had to go out to Bayern and make a fool of himself and lose the first year just to win the second year. Son stuck through. He's truly loyal to Spurs, and he got it done. He brought home a European trophy this year, and I just gotta give my respect to him. I think Son. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but in terms of a likable player, he's probably one of the most likable players in the history of the league. I think everyone, no matter if you love Spurs, hate Spurs, and a lot of people hate Spurs. I hate Spurs. I'm sure you guys hate Spurs. Everyone likes Son. Like, I always had a soft spot for him, and I couldn't truly let out all of my hate on Spurs because it meant, Spurs never win anything. That means Son never wins anything, and I feel like it would be a disrespect to his career for him to never win anything. So as much as I hate the Spurs, I was actually happy to see him lift that trophy. But now that he's gone, I can properly hate on Spurs. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking forward to that. But what do you guys think about this end of an era? And then we can talk about him heading to the MLS.
Man, legend, man. And what a way to go out, winning a first trophy for your club as the captain, and also being one of the last players of that Spurs team that really popped off, probably around 2015, 2016. He's the one who stuck around and who really believed in the project and just had that loyalty to the club. And I really respect that because it's the sort of thing that I feel like it's hard to come by these days. It's something that Man United is trying to find in the players it signs. And, you can have all the skill, but to have the loyalty and the heart with the team, that's something completely different. And I think is a huge factor in making you a legend for a club like Spurs. So, man, I'm sad. It really is. This is more sad for me than De Bruyne going to Serie A, personally, because I enjoyed watching that Tottenham team a lot back in the day. And so now it's like a clean slate in my head. Even though he was, the last player of that era, now it's like, all right, fully new beginning. So it'll be interesting to see where the team goes. I am disappointed he's going to MLS just because, he could maybe still do something in Europe. 33, the potential's there. But yeah, all my respect to him, for real.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about even if a player leaves Europe prematurely in people's eyes, if you have that humble reputation, if you have a solid reputation just all around, I think there's something to be said about that move being a lot less criticized. I think back to Neymar leaving Europe to go to Saudi. He's now in Brazil, but seeing how obviously Neymar has a different kind of reputation, and he maybe did not accomplish as much as people had hoped that he would. I know we had a very, very brief conversation about him a few weeks back, and something we're gonna have to dive back into that. But when it comes to Son, man, as you guys mentioned, he's universally loved. So see someone make a move, I think people now see it not as much disappointing. It's more like, man, it's like a heartfelt departure from one of the more popular clubs in the UK. So, it's interesting. But we'll see. I guess we'll see how his future in the MLS plays out. It's crazy to see that LAFC are getting just another signing of that caliber. So, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that, about his future in the MLS in particular. What does the MLS look like now? What is that? Or unless there's anything else pertaining to his time at Spurs that you guys still want to dive into.
Yeah, just real quick, before we get to the MLS, I think I remember last week we talked about Bruno potentially going to Saudi for $100 million, and then I remember you saying, Lexi, that you were hoping Bruno could be a transitional player that helps Man United start this rebuild, and you wanted to keep him around as the captain to do that. And I feel like, that's like what we're hoping, what you're hoping potentially happens. And I think Son just proved like he literally was that player for Spurs. If you're talking about that Poch team and that time where they really fighting for Premier Leagues, near the top of the league consistently, like a lot of years where they were the team pushing a team to a title, especially that last year was funny. But Champions League final, which is crazy. The Son stuck through it as the captain. He brought through these new young players. He mentored them, even last year, where he was clearly on the decline. He wasn't getting as many minutes as he usually would. That couldn't play the way he usually could, because he lost a bit of that pace. But still bringing in those new players, and you can tell how much they respect him. I think it's a nice clean slate because Spurs have a new manager. They have a lot of new signings, a lot of interesting signings. I'm very curious about what Spurs are going to do next year. Maybe we can talk about that in a future video. But a lot of new signings coming through. I think this is like Son passing the torch to Thomas Frank, the new manager. Like, I helped you get the club get this far. Now it's your time to start a new slate. Because now, I think when you have a player like Son, who's so synonymous with the club and so legendary for the club, with the new manager coming in, with all these new signings, there still is this kind of pressure in the back of your head as a manager where, like, I have to fit Son into the rotation. Not that he's a scrub. He can still play for Spurs, but it's like, okay, now I have to, like, if he's our captain too, I can't just not play him. Like, I have to find some way to get him regular minutes. And that might not be what you're looking for the future of the club. Like, if Thomas Frank is coming in, he wants to work with all these new signings. Like, they have Kudus as well, who could play out there for that. He's going to be thinking, what about the future of the club? What are we going to do moving forward? And forcing Son into that rotation, it kind of slowed that development for this future squad. So I think for Son too, I think that's a really respectable move for him to say, okay, my time has come. Let me step away and allow this new squad to build and develop and flourish moving forward. So I really respect that. And I think too, you could tell how likable and respected Son is. I don't know if you guys saw it, but when he, of course, he got subbed out during the game so that he can get that moment where, like, he gets like that standing ovation. And even the Newcastle players came over, like, hugged Son, gave him a pat on the back, and they gave him that walk of honor basically off the pitch, where they gave him like a little tunnel where both teams players like patted him on the back as he left. That was just really heartwarming to see, just overall. I think that really speaks to Son. I don't think every player is getting it, so I think that really speaks to the respect that he got from not only his teammates but from his opponents across his career. Now, as for the MLS, apparently this is a record signing or something I'm seeing for the MLS in terms of fee. I don't know how true that is. I guess Messi went on a free. I don't remember. But in terms of the MLS, I think this does show that they're getting a little bit more aggressive in terms of bringing high-profile names. Of course, they have the Inter Miami, Brokeman, FC Barcelona squad right now that they're doing. But really, those players are all a lot older. They're really bringing players. Half of them I thought that were retired already, and then they're just bringing them out there to do a little reunion tour with Messi maintained a higher level into his age. But say next year, if there's some kind of fall off from Salah this year or next year, I know for me at least, I'm assuming Salah's going to Saudi, but there's no guarantee. Maybe the MLS pull up some crazy offer. We could be seeing Son versus Salah out in the MLS, Messi on a team. And then we're talking about some, I know it sounds crazy, but we're talking about like three of the greatest wingers of the last, Messi, won't last forever, but the last decade, all playing in the MLS. It just would be interesting, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be tuning in, but it does provide something where if I see a game coming to New York, where I'm like, oh, LAFC in New York, maybe I can go see Son, because Son's one of my favorite players ever. So I was like, I'll be Salah, he's cool, but Son is one of my favorite players ever, so that'll be a fun thing to go see. So I can respect that as well. But speaking of Son and De Bruyne both leaving, I'm doing a little career mode on FIFA right now with Roma out in Serie A, and I signed both Son and De Bruyne, give them a farewell tour, And hey, they both cooking. They still got something to offer. But yeah, what do you think about the MLS, Alexis?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said in terms of it potentially with Salah and other players in the future, like they're just going after it more of trying to bring that attention to the league. And in theory, like for viewership on TV or Apple TV or wherever you watch MLS, like I could see that maybe working a little bit. And I would probably turn up to a game, like if we saw those players going head to head. But the issue is, I think what we have with a lot of just ticket-based things now is where people be scalping the tickets like crazy for any game Messi is at. And I fear that would become even more of an issue, just pricing people out who would maybe have interest in finally going to an MLS game. But when a ticket's like $300, it's like, no shot I'm paying that price. No shot. So I think that's a problem that will probably come down the line. I'm not sure how the ticketing works actually in the European leagues, and I know, season tickets is one thing, but yeah, in MLS, I'm not sure how that would turn out, but I do think it does show a dedication of growing the sport. There's more investment coming in, but I also see it a bit as like a Band-Aid to a larger wound of, the players, the core group of players who are playing in MLS just not having the skill, not having the talent, and that meaning our development is just not where it should be. So I think as a temporary solution, as long as the money is there, it works. But I don't think it's the ideal scenario.
Yeah, that's fair. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the MLS has interestingly become just like one of the more, I don't want to say like competitive leagues, but when it comes to signing those big names, I know you guys mentioned Son may still have something to offer in Europe, but the fact that we see him now go to the MLS could be a personal decision. Right? Just kind of want to ride out my career and just play for 1 year and just wrap it up. But over the past few years, like we've seen how the MLS has signed those big names, and I think it's definitely gonna. I think if you look at it from the perspective of this is going to grow the sport of soccer in the U.S. regardless of how you look at it, because there's going to be a growing interest for those big names. Those big names to arrive. You're not going to get people into the seats. You're not going to sell out those games unless people have a reason to go. Son is going to be that reason, and I think it's interesting now to see players. I think when it was first happening, I remember Ibra was in his late 30s, and then Rooney was also in his late 30s. But over the past few years, we've seen that age kind of decrease a little bit, and so I'm interested in seeing how that's going to continue to play out over the few years. There's a few players, and I can speak on the Mexican national side, who I would say also arrived to the MLS very early into their careers, where it was like, man, you were literally Lozano, who is a huge part of our 2018 roster. And he's still, I think he's 30 now, but he's been at San Diego FC. He was like one of the first, he's probably the big signing for that new club. And I'm like, you're 30 and you've decided to go to the MLS. Carlos Vela signed to LAFC at 28 years old. Like, it's just crazy to see. And I know these aren't like high caliber European players, but these are still players who are playing in Europe who, well, Lozano had a little bit of an interesting shakeout in Napoli, but I think that's because he was on one of the more competitive teams in Italy. But, you know, it's crazy to see that these players still have a lot to offer and they're choosing to go to a place where the sport is growing. So there is a little bit of a positive side of that. Obviously, money is always going to push somebody to want to sign. But when you look at a player like Son, he's made enough money where it's like, and maybe that's just me, like just out of tune. He's like, all right, like he's made enough money. There has to be a bigger reason to go to the U.S. But maybe it is just enough money. We don't know. But I think all in all, we're going to continue to see those names sign, and I think we're going to continue to see that age drop. So the quality of soccer in the MLS may actually be continue to increase. I don't want to say begin to increase, but I think over time it's not where it used to be, which is a good thing. But it's just interesting all around. I'm still not fully warmed up to the idea because I just want to see the highest quality of soccer still in Europe. Just, you know, that's what we're used to. But I think for the league itself, it's definitely a positive. But yes, I can also see how it affects the development of the younger players who are actually trying to make it out, probably trying to improve the U.S. men's national team, just quality in general. But yeah, just a lot of things to think about for sure.
Yeah, and one last thing, unless you have anything to add, Alexi, is I just thought of is for Son. Like you see Neymar who went to Saudi and then now he's back in Brazil, and that's like a nice homecoming moment. Maybe you could say Son, maybe he should go to Korea or something, go back home to Korea and play in that league, whatever. But I just thought that LA specifically does have a large Korean community out there, and I do think that maybe that's part of it for Son. I'm not in his brain, but I wouldn't be surprised if you're talking about MLS moving, that team specifically would make a lot of sense for him in terms of now he could probably get a big Korean community turnout at LAFC games specifically. Son, wherever Son goes, and that's the thing too, like you see Spurs playing out in Korea right now, and they've done that a lot of years going out there for like their preseason tour or whatever. Son, wherever Son goes, he brings an entire market with him. He's basically a god out in Korea. So I wouldn't be surprised if next summer LAFC is doing a little preseason something out in Korea, or now you have the Korean fan base back in Son in the US. I think that is a little underrated in terms of the pull that he has with that community and the pull that he'll have with that community out in LA. Like if you join Inter Miami, like it's not the same. Then I'll be like, okay, that's probably purely just a financial thing. But LAFC, I can actually see there being like that cultural pull to go there and have that little tie there. If you can't go back to Korea specifically, then that's probably one of the bigger Korean communities outside of Korea. So I can
That's
see
a
that.
really good point. That's a good point because, like, especially being in England this long, I mean, that is probably the farthest place from Korea. So, you know, even just being that bit closer, I could see that being a big factor into this move.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there you go, Son. End of an era. My respects to him. I'm sure all of our respects to him, as we said. True legend of the Premier League and a true likable legend. A lot of these legends, you know, we hate on other teams' legends all the time, even though we have to admit it, like De Bruyne.